This is the easiest and the fastest way to get started with DaVinci Resolve, and it's absolutely free. Hi, I'm Alex Jordan from Learn Color Grading and FilmSimplified.com. Over the past 2 years, our DaVinci Resolve Simplified courses helped thousands of filmmakers learn DaVinci Resolve, the Hollywood standard for color grading, and really understand color theory, color control, and the art of color grading itself. And now with this free course, you'll be able to learn DaVinci Resolve on color grading in less than 30 minutes in the easiest and the simplest way possible. By the end of this course, you will be able to understand nodes, the interface, reading the scopes, using the color wheels, and much more. And now, let's start. Don't forget to sign up for the same course on FilmSimplified.com using the link below. You'll be getting free LUTs and free footage to practice on that you can download, and everything will be structured in an easy way where you can just find the information you're looking for easy. Now, let's start with exploring the interface of DaVinci Resolve. Let's take a look.
DaVinci's interface is divided into 4 different tabs. So you have the Media tab. We're currently displaying the Media tab, the Edit tab, the Color, and the Deliver tab. The Media tab is where you import your footage. The Edit is obviously where you manage your timelines and you edit your footage. Then we have the Color tab. This is where all the magic happens. Then you have the Deliver tab. The Deliver tab is the Render tab. This is where you render your projects. And these are the 4 main tabs of DaVinci Resolve. Let's start with a tour of the Color tab. On the top left, you have your gallery. This is where you store your looks and your gallery shots. This is also where you import your stills. Then you have the monitor, and down here on the left of the monitor, you have your overlay options. Then, to the right here, you have your nodes. Nodes have multiple spaces. You'll notice a drop-down menu here. These are currently the nodes for the clip. So all the nodes that are placed here will only affect the clip that is being selected right now. If you go to the drop-down and choose Timeline, there are no nodes here right now. If we add a node here, it will affect our entire timeline. So every single clip on the timeline will be affected by the nodes here. Let's go back to clip mode. Then you have your timeline. This is a visual representation of the original timeline in the Edit tab. So every shot here on the timeline is being represented with a thumbnail here. In the Color tab, all the thumbnails here are the same size, regardless of the length of the original clip in the Edit tab. Some clips are just longer than other clips, but they're still represented with the same size thumbnail in the Color tab because we're only comparing color here. And down here with these 2 windows, you have your coloring effects. Let's take a closer look. First, if you come to this icon here and you click on it, these are the camera raw settings. This is where you control your camera settings if you shot in RAW. Then you have the Color Match tab. This tab is designed to use color charts to color correct your image. Then you have the color wheels. Color wheels comes in 2 different modes, primary and log. From this drop-down menu, you can choose between primary or log. Primary is being displayed in 2 different ways. These are actually 2 different color wheels, but I have 3 options here because primary wheels can be displayed in 2 different ways. So if I come to primary bars, these primaries here are the same as the primary effect here. So if I come to primaries mode here and I change anything and I come back to the primaries bars, notice that the changes have been applied here. So it's the same effect represented visually in 2 different ways. Let me reset. Then you have your RGB mixer and the motion effects. Moving to the right here, the first thing is curves. We have 6 different types of curves in DaVinci Resolve. I can switch through the different types of curves through this drop-down menu here. Then you have the qualifier window. We have 4 different types of qualifiers in DaVinci Resolve. You can access them through the drop-down menu here. So you have the HSL, RGB, Luma, and the new 3D qualifier. Then you have window. This is where you add power windows to your shots, and you can even add more power windows through the extra buttons here. Then you have the tracker. This is where you track power windows to certain elements on the screen. So if someone's head is moving in your footage, you can lock a window to their face. Then you have the blur effects. We have 3 different types of blur in DaVinci Resolve. we have blur, sharpen, and mist. Then you have key. This is where you control the gain of the color node you're on. In other words, this is where you control how powerful the effect applied through the node you're on right now. Then you have sizing. This is where you do pan, zoom, and tilt, for example. Then we have 3D. 3D doesn't work in the free version of DaVinci Resolve, so we can't click on it now. But this is where you grade stereoscopic images. Then you have your data burn in. And to the right here, you have the keyframe tab. This is where you change your color over time. And here you have your scopes. If you click on this button here, these are your scopes. You have 4 different types of scopes in DaVinci Resolve: waveform, parade, Victorscope, and histogram. You can click on this button here to undock your scopes so you have them floating. This gives you the ability maybe to move them to a secondary monitor and see more than one scope at once. To dock them again, just close them by clicking on this button. We also have the lightbox view. If you come here and click on this button, this is the lightbox view. This is a visual representation of our timeline. This is designed to check the color flow in our film from beginning to end. So you can check for any changes in color throughout the film. We can change the size of our thumbnails. And we can click on this button to show or hide more information. Notice that some clips have this color around the number. This means that these images have some coloring applied to them. And images without the color around the edge means that no effects have been applied to these images. And if you click on this button on the top here, you get your coloring effects. So we have all the coloring effects and all the color controls here. So if I click on this image, for example, I can change the exposure from here. Okay, let's close the lightbox mode. Then you have these buttons here. This one is to hide or view your nodes. Then you have the Open Effects window. When I click on it, now I have this new window. This is where you open your pre-installed Open Effects plugins. When you're zoomed in your monitor, you'll notice that there is no way to control your image. In terms of panning it around, you can only zoom out or zoom in. And if you try to move the image around, nothing happens. You'll move the image around with the middle button. I know this seems easy, but it usually causes a lot of frustration for new users of DaVinci Resolve. To reset the zoom, just hit Shift and Z.
In order to work with color, we need to understand the 3 main ranges: shadows, midtones, and highlights.
Highlights are the brightest parts in the image. So if we take a look at this image here, the sky would be the highlights, and the darkest areas here would be the shadows, and everything in between will be the midtones. Most controls in color grading environments try to work separately with every color range, trying to have controls that affects highlights, midtones, and shadows separately.
Don't forget to sign up for the same course on filmsimplified.com using the link below. You'll be getting free LUTs and free footage to practice on that you can download, and everything will be structured in an easy way where you can just find the information you're looking for easy. DaVinci Resolve works in a slightly different way than what most of us are used to work with. It uses nodes. Now, what is a node and why do we use a node?
Simply put, a node is a container of color effects. Let's go to color, reset all grades and nodes, and now we have no grading on this image. This node will remember all the effects and controls we apply down here. So if we go to primaries, increase the saturation, and change the gain, all the information, all the changes we made down here are now saved to this node. And this includes all the effects down here. So if I switch to primaries bars and I bring the gamma down a bit, increase the gain, and bring the lift down, and maybe change something about the curves, all the changes that I made down here and here to all the effects are now saved to this node. So if I add a new node by going to nodes and add a serial node, now I have a new node. This is our original file, and this is the final output of our color grading. The first node will be applied to our original image first, before the effects from the second node are being applied to the output of the first node. So if I come to the second node and I double click on it, now I have this color around it. So now it's being selected. So now whatever I do here is being applied to this particular node. So now I'm on the second node. I'm just going to come back here and remove the saturation. You'll notice that the final image that is actually coming to the output is black and white. That's because we removed all the color in the second node. The question is, why do we use nodes? Nodes provide some interesting functionality that you cannot usually get through using layers. Let's come to color again and reset all grades in nodes. Now what I'm going to do is to choose two different parts in the image and add them to different nodes. So I'm going to add a new node by going to nodes and add a serial node. And now I'm going to add a parallel node. I'll go to nodes, add a parallel node. Now you see the image coming from the first node is being split. It's going to this node and this node, and they are combined again through the parallel node combiner before being moved out to the final output. So now I can control certain parts in the image through node 2 and other parts through node 4. Now node 4 controls the green parts of the image, and node 2 controls the sky. So if I select node 4 by double clicking on it and apply any changes down here, I'm going to be only affecting the green parts of the image. So I can make them more green or even make them yellow. And of course this includes all the effects. So all the gamma changes, all the saturation changes, and that includes everything I do here also, whether to curves or to any other effect. Because I'm currently selecting node 4, and if I select node 2 by double clicking on it, now I have this line around it telling me that this is the selected node now. Now I can control the sky. So let's increase the gain, for example, of the sky and change its color. And this parallel combiner here will just combine the images together that are coming from node 2 and node 4 in order to send the image to the final output. And of course, I can add new nodes after the parallel combiner. So I can simply go to nodes and add a serial node. And now I can continue grading on the output from the parallel combiner, which happens to combine these two nodes.
And now that we understand nodes, let's take a look at the second most popular type of nodes, which is the outside node.
The outside node selects everything that is not being selected in the node right before it. So if I add a new node here, and I add a power window to it, you can see now that for this node, whatever I do down here will only affect the parts that are inside the circle. But what if I wanted to affect the parts that are outside the circle? Now with this node being selected, I'm going to go to nodes and add an outside node. The first node will affect everything inside the circle, and this node will affect everything outside the circle. I'm going to choose the second node here and reduce the gamma a bit, reduce the saturation, and add a bit of contrast. Now we have these two nodes affecting different parts in the image. Note that the second node, which is the outside node, will automatically be affected by the key of the node before it. So if I go back to this node and maybe make the window smaller and move it to the left, note that the second node, which is the outside node, updated automatically to select everything that is not being selected by the node before it. The question here is, why use an outside node? Well, because there are more different and complicated types of masking. Now we have a different type of selection. I just selected his face, so whatever I do here will only affect the face. Now if I add an outside node, this node will invert all the masking of the first node. So now I have the rest of the image to control. So if I come to the second node here, which is selecting the rest of the image, and I change any of the effects here, I'm controlling the rest of the image without the face. If I go back to the first node and I change anything about it, I'm only affecting the face.
And now that we understand nodes, let's start by understanding our tools. The most popular tool that is used in any coloring environment is the wheels. DaVinci Resolve offers two main types of wheels.
You'll find yourself spending a lot of time on primaries and log controls in Resolve. And it's very important to understand what primaries and log controls are and what are the differences between them. If you come to the color wheel here, you'll notice that it's on primaries wheels now. There is also the primaries bars and the log mode. Let's stay on Primary's wheels for now. There are 4 color wheels. In order to understand the color wheels, we first have to look at the image. In every image, there are 3 main ranges. In this image, the area on the right here represents the highlights. It's the brightest area in the image, and her hair represents the shadows. It's the darkest area in the image, and everything else is midtones. So for this image, these are the highlights. Her face and this area are the midtones, and her hair is the shadows. If we come to the color wheels here, the one on the left represents the shadows. So all the changes I make here will affect the shadow areas of the image. In this case, the hair, the one next to it here, gamma, represents the midtones. All the changes I make here will affect the midtones of the image. Next we have the gain. Whatever I do here will affect the highlights of the image. And then we have offset. This one will control all the image regardless of the color range. So if I come to the one on the left here and I push it towards blue, you will notice that the effect is starting to take place in the dark areas of the image. And if I come to the one on the right here and I push it towards orange, you will notice that the effect is starting to take place in the highlights of the image. So the brightest areas of the image, and the one in the middle will affect the rest of the image. For the offset here, it will affect the entire image. And these wheels here will also affect the brightness of these color ranges. So the color wheel on the left will affect the brightness of the dark areas of the image. Gain will affect the brightness of the brightest points in the image. And gamma will affect the brightness of the rest of the image, which is the midtones. Notice that for precise controls, Resolve can display primaries in 2 different ways. This is the color wheels, but if I come to the drop-down menu here, I can choose primaries bars. These are the same color wheels that we have. So we have the color wheel of the shadows, the color wheel of the midtones, and the color wheel of the highlights, and the overall color wheel with more precise controls. So for example, I can control the red channel in the highlights, or the blue channel in shadows. And of course, if I go to offset, I can control the red channel in the entire image. If we go back to the drop-down menu here, we can also switch to log controls. It's the same idea, only with much narrower data ranges that affects the same parts of the image, just more precisely. So, the highlights, the midtones, and the shadows will affect the highlights, midtones, and shadows the same way, just with more precise controls. So let's reset everything and compare both log and primaries. First, I'll switch to primaries, and I'm going to push gain towards yellow. Notice how the entire image is becoming more yellow, even though I tried to control the gain only. The effect leaked into the gamma area of the image, or the midtones. So my adjustment here controlled the highlights and parts of the midtones. However, if I reset and switch my controls to log, and again push highlights in the same direction exactly, notice how different the effect is. What happened here is that I controlled the highlights, and the effect tried hard not to affect the midtones. This is the same adjustment applied side by side. The one on the right was applied through log. The one on the left had the same adjustments exactly, the only difference that it was applied through primaries. Notice how different the look is. The one with primaries had less of an effect in the highlights, and my highlight adjustments also affected parts of the midtones, her face in this case. But if we compare it to the log adjustment, I affected only the highlights, and notice that there is no effect on the midtones. Usually what I do is I apply primaries first, and then I would apply log to stylize the image. But that's what I do. It's subjective, and you can experiment for yourself.
Don't forget to sign up for the same course on filmsimplified.com using the link below. You will be getting free LUTs and free footage to practice on that you can download, and everything will be structured in an easy way where you can just find the information you're looking for easy. Resolve offers 6 main types of curves. Now, the most popular is the RGB curves. Now, in this 101 course, let's really understand how RGB curves work.
If you click on this button here, you will be represented with the curves controls of DaVinci. You have 6 different types of curves in DaVinci Resolve. You can access the different types of curves through the drop-down menu on the top right here. Let's start with custom curves. This curve represents the image from highlights to shadows, with the midtones in between. So if I come to highlights and I grab the handle and I move it down, you'll notice that I'm affecting the highlights without affecting the shadows. And if I grab the curve from the middle and I move it up or down, I'm affecting the midtones without affecting the highlights or shadows. I'm going to click on this button to reset. And finally, shadows. If I grab the shadows controller, I'm only affecting the shadows without affecting the highlights. Notice that moving the highlights or shadows will affect the midtones, unless you have a pin in the middle to actually hold the midtones in place. Let's reset. The main question is why curves? As long as we have the same controls over highlights, midtones, and shadows in the color wheels, the answer is precision. Notice that I can control the midtones, the highlights, and the shadows, and I can still add more control points in the middle. I can add as many points as I need. Let me reset. Notice that this is not one curve. We actually have 4 curves here overlaid on top of each other. So now when I move the main curve, it moves all the curves with it the same way. That's why I cannot see the curves, because they're overlaid. However, I have this button here. If you click on this button, now you lost the colors here. Before, when the button was clicked, we had the Y, R, G, and B with their colors. But now when I click the button, now only the Y is colored. This means that whatever I do now is only affecting the Y, or the luma, without affecting the other curves. So now when I move the luma, I have this curve showing behind it, and I have a control point here. If I click on the R, now this point changed. So now I can control the red curve. If I click on the G, I can control the green curve, and B for the blue curve. Note that I do not have to click on the buttons every time I want to move a curve. I can simply just click on the green curve, the luma, blue, or red. So now I can, for example, only affect the red channel. Notice that when I clicked, I already had a new point added. To remove the point, I only have to right-click on the point. So I can control the red, the blue, or the green channel. Let's reset. Notice that when I reset, it resets the curves, but it did not reset the Gang Custom Curves button. So now with the curves unganged, if I wanted to change the highlights in the blue channel, I'm just going to have to click on the blue channel to show its curve. So I'm just going to come to the highlight controller of the blue curve and just bring it down. And now I just reduced the blue channel and the highlights. Let's reset. And to reduce red and shadows, I have to click on the red curve, go to the shadows controller, and just pull it down. Notice that in curves, this is down. So if I pull the highlight controller down, this is down. And if I pull it to the left, I'm actually increasing it. And for shadows, if I pull the controller to the right, I'm decreasing it. And if I pull it up, I'm increasing it. So generally, this is down, and this section here is up. So let's click on Y to come back to Luma. And I'm just going to click on these 3 dots here to show the extra options for curves. The first option here is editable splines. Currently, when I create a new point, let's say that I created a point here, it's just a point. I can move it up or down. If I go to the drop-down menu here and click on editable splines, now I have 2 new points. These are not new points. These are controllers for this point. To understand what's happening, let's just move it up or down. This provides me with very precise controls over the control points in my curves. So for example, I can simply add more contrast this way, and I can target exactly where to add this contrast. I'm going to right-click on the control point to delete it. And now if I click on the highlights point, I have a new point here. This new point will give me more controls over my highlights. So if I pull it out, I'm actually increasing the effect in this direction. Let's reset. Now let's come back to the drop-down menu here and uncheck editable splines. Another option is to add default anchors. If I click it, now I have 3 points created here. These are the usual points you will find yourself creating in curves to control the shadows, midtones, and highlights without having to control the end point here. Because sometimes if I try to control this point here, it's very easy for me to overexpose my highlights. So I have these 3 points created, and I can just control the points.
Now that we understand nodes and some of the basic color controls in DaVinci Resolve, let's understand how to reduce the opacity of a node. So you have your node, you have your coloring applied to it, and you don't want to change the color, you just want to dial it down or make it less prominent. Let's take a look at it.
You can access the Key tab by clicking this button next to Blur. This is where you mix the original image with the color graded image. Let's apply a stylized look to this image by coming here, going to Log, and just pushing the highlights and shadows in different directions. As you can see, this is a very powerful look. I don't want to change the look, I just want to dial it down a bit, make it less prominent. So I'll come down to Key Output Gain and just put it down. If I take it all the way back to 0, notice that I'm back to the original image again. What's happening here is that I'm controlling the opacity of this node. So by increasing gain, I'm adding more of the effect from this node.
Don't forget to sign up for the same course on filmsimplified.com using the link below. You will be getting free LUTs and free footage to practice on that you can download, and everything will be structured in an easy way where you can just find the information you're looking for easy. And now let's take a look at a full example where we color grade an image from start to finish.
Okay, the first thing you'll notice when you look at this image is that the white balance is really off. There's something wrong with the white balance. So the easiest way to accurately white balance an image is to look at an object in the image that should be white. So we have the cover here. This should be white originally, so it will help us balancing our image. So the easiest way is to come to Curves and choose Custom Curves and uncheck the Gang Custom Curves here. So now we can control every curve separately. And then I'm just going to sample the cover here. And now I have these points created because of the sample I clicked on. So if I click on R, this is the R. So when I clicked here, this is where the red channel is. When I clicked the green, this is where the green channel is, and this is where the blue channel is. So in order to balance this image, the 3 points should be on the same horizontal line, or should be on the same horizontal level. So we can see here that the red is down, the green is way up, and the blue is somewhere in the middle. So I'm just going to balance everything to the Y point here. So I'm just going to bring the blue down a bit, go to green, bring green down, so it will balance with the blue. And finally, I'm going to bring the red channel up to be on the same horizontal level. So just gonna click it and just bring it up to this point here. And look at the image now. We just white balanced the image effectively. So I'm just going to increase saturation. I'll add a new node, increase saturation, and take a look at the original image and the new image. After white balancing the image, we will start grading the image. Now, if you look at the image, you'll notice 2 main things happening. You have the action in the middle here, so the boy and the girl are reading this book. And in the background, you have a practical light here that we will be using later. So I'll add a new node. And in this node, I'm going to create a window around the boy and the girl. So, and then I'll add an outside window so I can create the rest of the image. And I'm just going to bring the gamma down in the rest of the image. Yeah, much better. So now we just brought the gamma down a bit. And then I'm going to come back to the node that controls the main element here, which is the boy and the girl, and just hide the window so I can see my image better. Then I'm going to grab gain in primaries and just pull it toward yellow or orange, much better. Then I'm going to go to the outside node and just pull gamma this time, not gain, toward blue. Much better. So now we have the image slightly balanced. Let's take a look at the original image. This looks much better. It's white balanced, and we have an object to look at in the image, an object to draw our attention to. There are 2 main things here remaining. Now we have a practical light in the background. So if we zoom out a bit, notice that we have this light in the image. Now we can use this light to illuminate the image even more and add a certain mood to the image. So I'm going to add a new node, create a window. Let me view the window, and I'm just gonna bring it on top of the window here and feather it. Okay, much better. So now I'm just gonna treat this node as if it's light emitting from this source here. So let's just hide the window And the window looks yellow, so I'm just going to bring the colors more toward yellow. Maybe more orange, much better. So now I use the practical light to add a certain mood to the image. Finally, I'm going to add a new node and go to log and just start fiddling with the midtones, highlights, and shadows, to add targeted contrast. So I'm just looking at their faces here. I'm just going to take the midtone down or up, much better. Okay. Highlights. When I change the highlights, take a look at the cover here. So, yeah, much better. And finally, shadows. And the image looks much better now. Take a look at the before and after. This is the original image. And this is the new image.
Don't forget to sign up for the same course on filmsimplified.com using the link below. You'll be getting free LUTs and free footage to practice on that you can download, and everything will be structured in an easy way where you can just find the information you're looking for easy.